Hi everyone, I'm Ehsan, and after years of working with new grad students and senior engineers, I keep seeing the same pattern. A new hire walks into a meeting and speaks with total confidence, and on the other hand, a senior engineer in the corner quietly says, "It depends, we need to collect the logs and evaluate." And the reason is not the personality. It's how our brain works with experience. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the psychology and the scientific reason behind it. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So I'm going to start talking about that, and then I'm going to talk about how this show up at workplace, and then I'm going to talk about how to improve your self-assessment, and finally I'm going to show you a popular curve which is not the Dunning-Kruger effect. So this video is both for the new hires and the seniors, and by the end of this video you are gonna see the science behind why you are reacting the way you do. So let's start with explaining the Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect comes from two psychologists which published a paper and explained why the incompetent people have more self-assessment. They think they know more, and also they are not aware of this. And they have tested them in 3 different domains: in the social skills, logical reasonings, and grammar. So I'm going to explain one of these figures, and if you understand that one, you are going to understand all 3. So let me explain the one in the middle, which is on the x-axis, people with performance on this specific domain, which is logical reasoning. So the bottom quartile are the people who have less skills in this field, and all the way to the top quartile. And then also on the y-axis, we have the percentile. So what they did some tests on these people, and the expectation is the people on the bottom quartile is gonna do bad, that's obvious, and the people on the top quartile, they are gonna do great. So you are gonna see their actual test score here. But then they did something else. They asked them, how was the exam? What do you think about the outcome of your performance? And the result was surprising. They thought they are better than 50% of the people. They marked themselves in the 60-something percentile, which is not their actual test score. So their self-assessment is much higher than what they actually did. And the funny thing is, they also offered, not in this experiment, but in another experiment, in another task, told them they are gonna get $100 if they can guess how much their score would be from that exam. And again, the self-rated test score was wrong, above like 50%. And they also asked them, what is your ability in this specific domain? And they marked themselves higher than what they actually are. And they asked the same questions from the second quartile, the third, and the top quartile. So here you see the pattern. The people with low performance, they think they do better and they know better, and the people who are on the top, they have underestimated their knowledge and it's slightly lower than what they actually are. Now that I explained this figure, it's the same idea for all 3. So it's different domains: the social skills, the logical reasoning, the one that I explained, and the grammar. So here, the interesting thing is the people with low performance, they see themselves higher in the self-assessment. And this is what is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And on the other side, we have the top performers, which they underestimate themselves. And that is called the false consensus effect, which is not the topic of this video. Let's focus on the Dunning-Kruger effect. In the original paper, they only tested it in 3 domains, but other researchers, they have done the same study and they got the same results. And that's why this is so important to know that this effect exists, and it says the poor performance cannot even recognize that they don't have the expertise and the knowledge in that specific field. And with that, let's go to the second part of the video, which I'm going to explain how this is going to show up at the workplace. You know about these figures already. So what I did, I tried to adopt the concept and create a new figure which applies to the workplace. Again, this is not in the original paper. This is the adopted from the Dunning-Kruger effect. So what I did for the bottom quartile, I put the new hire, and for the top quartile, I put the senior. And this is their actual competence. We expect the new hire have lower competence compared to the senior in one specific domain, and also the self-rated competence would be higher. And because people have done many experiments in many different situations and they got the same pattern, this is going to be valid. And there are three workplace related things we can capture from this figure. The first one is the new hire has a higher self-rated competence about himself or herself in one specific domain, which is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. We know about that. And the seniors have a slightly lower estimate about themselves in that specific task. And when I was preparing this video, I watched a presentation by Dunning that said those who don't know don't seem to know that they don't know. And I think this is very powerful. Now let's go to the second fact about this figure, which is the gap you see between the new hires self-assessment and the seniors. For the new hires in one specific skill or task, there is a bigger gap between their actual competence and their self-rated competence. Now let's talk about the third finding in this paper, which I found it interesting, but I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. And for any situation that we have a trainee and a trainer, if you know about this fact, as a trainee, you know what question to ask. And as a trainer, you know how to prepare the material to have a better training. So this is going to help both of you. So let's dive in, and I'm going to unpack what they have explained in their paper. So on the left, you already know what's going on. It's a logical reasoning domain, and they have done some tests. So this is their actual score, and this is what they think they have done. And on the right, we have the same logical reason test, but it's after training. And you see something interesting happening, but it's very difficult to see. Let's superimpose these two together and see what's going on. The gray is before training and the solid black is after training. So what happened here? The gap is now slightly smaller. So here, when they asked this bottom quartile, how was the exam? They rated themselves around like 60 something, but now it's around like 50. They haven't eliminated to 0. Still, you can see the gap, but it's a little bit smaller. So now we know we have to do some sort of training to make that gap smaller. But what type of training? When I was reading their paper, they were talking about metacognitive skills and metacognitive training. And now the question is, what are those metacognitive trainings that we can apply in our training to improve the self-awareness of that new hire about himself or herself in that specific topic? And here on this slide, I have shown what they have done. On the right, this is the exact sentence they have in the paper. But on the left, I made it some sort of like high level training materials that you can apply when you train someone. So these 6 different topics that I'm going to explain in the next part of the video, which is how to improve your self-assessment using metacognitive trainings. So by now we know that this gap exists and we want to make it smaller using metacognitive trainings, and there are 6 ways that are science-backed. They have explained it in their paper, and we want to explain how to use that to improve our self-assessments. So I'm going to use one example, and you know I'm an engineer with a chemistry background, and I could use one engineering example or a chemistry example. But not all the people who are watching this video are engineers or chemists. So I had to come with one universal example, which is the parallel parking. So I'm going to use this as the example, and I'm going to go through all these 6 trainings, and I want you to think about your own job. And if you are a trainer, what you can think of in your specific job. Let's say I'm a chemist, I have to teach someone how to use the HPLC, for example. Think about one specific task or a skill in your job and think of it when I'm explaining these parallel parking with these trainings, and think how you can apply that, what kind of activity you can do when you do that training. And also, you don't have to go through all these 6 trainings. You can use one of them and get practice, get better, and then improve on top of that, make your material better over time. You don't have to do all of this at once. I know this is a lot. So with that, let's go to the parallel parking example. And I have to say that again, this is for the new hires when you do a training, or someone who doesn't have a skill, and this is also for one task and one specific skill. So let's start with the first one, which is the error detection. What we can do for the trainee is to show them some figures or videos and tell him or her to spot the error. So here, this is the parallel parking example, and I'm showing 2 errors. And if I'm training someone, a new driver, I can show a video or a figure and say, can you spot the error in this figure? And this is going to help that person to have a better self-assessment about the skills that he has. Now, going to the second one is they should be able to identify a good versus bad examples, showing them this is a good one and this is a bad one. Don't tell them which one is a good and bad, but ask them to identify it for you. And the third one is having a criteria for a good performance. Say, this is the list. If you want to pass, if you want to do something great in this task, these are the specific steps and tasks that you have to check in and make sure you are meeting them all. So this is the third one. And the fourth one is asking them to explain their logic behind their choice or their act. And then explain as the trainer, what is your logic? And the next one is asking them to explain why something is correct. So in this case, they have parked correctly, for example. Then ask them, why do you think this is correct? This is gonna help them to think and explain in their own word why this is correct. Any action that you can imagine about your job, as I said. And the last one is this loop of predict, feedback, and reflect. Let them do the task and then ask them, what do you think? Predict your act, predict your action, and then give them the feedback and ask them to repeat. So this cycle is going to help them to have a really good assessment about their knowledge and their expertise. So again, these 6, you don't have to do all of them, but if you can master one of these and then build on top of that, as the trainer, you can drastically improve your training skills. And also as a trainee, you now know what type of questions to ask to have a better understanding about your own knowledge, to know yourself, to know your knowledge and expertise. But this is one side of the training, which is the metacognitive training. We talked about it. We want to close that gap. But how do we go from a new hire to a senior? How do we improve ourselves to become a senior? And that happens through practice. Every skill that you learn with the practice, you can improve and become better and better, and over time will become a senior. And this chart on the right, it's not on the paper, it's not tested, but this is what I think about improving myself to become a senior. It's by practice in that specific knowledge. So now let's go to the last part of this video, which is one popular curve which is wrong. If you Google Dunning-Kruger effect, you are going to see a bunch of curves which are similar to each other, but I found only one of them which is correct. The rest is not. And I'm going to explain why this is not correct. And also, if you search on YouTube, Dunning-Kruger effect, you are going to find only one video explaining that why this is wrong. The rest, they are showing that wrong curve and why that is not correct. There are many reasons that this curve, which people call it Dunning-Kruger effect curve, is wrong. I'm going to explain a few of them. So one is they have charted competence versus confidence, which is not what we saw in the original paper. And also they are talking about the know nothing, which is someone who begins to learn something, but in the paper they are talking about poor performance. It's more about performance in one specific topic. And they never talked about Mount's stupid. They said incompetence, someone who doesn't have that expertise. They never talked about people being stupid. So here they are obviously saying that. And the other thing is they have shown that people with a slight knowledge about something having the same confidence as a senior or guru, which is not correct. So this curve is not the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the last thing I want to say before finishing this video is that I didn't want to underestimate the potential of a new hire or someone who starts to learn a new skill. We all have been here. We all started from somewhere, and in any skill, we start from a place that we don't know that much. The point of this video was how do we can ask the right questions, and how do we have a better training if you are a senior, and how do we can close that gap about our self-assessment. This is all about this. It's not about underestimating the potential of a new hire, because we all start from somewhere. So in this video, I showed you the Dunning-Kruger effect, how this applies in the workplace or any training situation, how to improve our self-assessment, and also I showed you the wrong curve. So I hope you learned something from this video. See you in the next one.